Hi, and welcome to Spooky Art with Saunderson. Today we're talking to British artist Graham Humphreys. We're going to be talking to him about his new book. And I think this is going to come back to front, but I'll put a picture up of it later. Nightmare on One Sheet, the horror art of Graham Humphreys. Now, anyone who has bought any kind of horror film or sort of even fantasy art type video film of late probably has Graham's artwork on there. He seems to be everywhere, and he's now just released his apparently it's his third book, but he apparently classes as his second book. So we'll be asking him about that. We've spoken to Graham on Spooky Owls before. He's one of our favourite people. We love his artwork, and that's why he's back on the Spooky Owls to talk about this book and talk about the horror art that he's been doing. And it's going to be a great conversation. So as I say, here's Graham Humphreys. Hello, Graham. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much. How are you?
Good, thank you. Congratulations on this wonderful book. As I put up again, you might want to put yours up. You've got your copy there.
I have,
See if
yes.
they're both going to be back to front. They probably are. So what I'm going to now do is I'm going to do this, see if it works.
Well, mine looks bigger because I'm smaller than you.
Yours is a baby size. But yeah, so there it is there. What a wonderful thing. And as people will know, it's called Nightmare on One Street because you did the original artwork. Now I've got to make sure I'm right here. It was for the British poster, or was it for the worldwide poster of Nightmare on Elm Street?
It was just for the UK.
Okay, but it was the best version, and that's why that's the only one we
Thank
like.
you.
So how did this come about? How did the new book come about? Because you've written Hung, Drawn, and Executed, which came out a few years ago. Why? I mean, I know the answer to this. Anyone who sees this book will know the answer to it. But why do another one?
Well, that's a good question. Um, well, the first one came about really through meeting the publisher quite a few years back, and he'd said at the time, if you ever think about doing a book, uh, perhaps we can talk about doing it together with his company, Carrero Press. That was quite some time ago, actually. And since then, there was the opportunity to produce a book through a different means. And that came about through, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. I was doing most things in life. But I went onto a program called Four Rooms, well, with the idea of uh, trying to get the money to publish the book myself and also fund an exhibition as well of some of the key pieces of work, including Nightmare on Elm Street. And uh, the result of I mean, it was a kind of success in one respect, in as much that uh, the idea was to look for a buyer for the original artwork for Nightmare on Elm Street and also Evil Dead 2. It's the kind of two things that I had, which I thought, somebody might want to buy, um, rather than the other kind of things that people bring onto the program were like sort of, memorabilia, from sort of, sports personalities and just odd things, kind of strange sculptural things, which have some sort of historical resonance. So I thought that I was originally approached actually by somebody called Vadim Cosmos, which is the most fantastic name, who was working then at the Last Tuesday Society, and we knew each other through various screenings and events and things. And he kind of was aware that I had a collection of quite odd items in the flat, and I think he was under the impression I had a large collection of unusual taxidermy. Well, I had one or two items, but nothing that amazing really, though. But anyway, this is all by the by because the net result was I went on the program, and a gentleman called Alex Proud uh, agreed to buy the two pieces of artwork for a very nominal sum. It was just some sort of something that could pass hands, um, which proved that they were then his, I guess. And then the idea was that he would fund the exhibition and publish the book. The book went through his own publishing arm. That was, so that was quite easy for him to do anyway, though. But he decided he was going to do some sort of incredibly luxury item, limited to about 500 copies in a sort of a clamshell box, and promised a team of people waiting to put the thing together for me. Well, as it happened, I put the whole thing together myself because clearly it wasn't going to happen otherwise. So anyway, they kind of produced this book, which was fine. I mean, it looked great, but was put out at a price point of 150 quid, which that is a luxury item, and to be quite honest, most horror fans don't have that kind of money to spend on a book, which is quite right as well. I mean, I would have bolted that as well myself. So anyway, it was kind of a little bit of it wasn't a disaster. It's just that kind of people couldn't afford to buy it. The exhibition did happen. He happened to have 3 different galleries, so it was held in a gallery in Camden Town, what was a horse hospital there as well. So that went very well. I didn't really sell anything. I sold 1 piece, I think, though. So in all, I didn't see a penny from the book at all. So I don't know. It was all a bit silly. He sold on the pieces of artwork for some very inflated price, and they're out there somewhere now. But anyway, a little while later, I had spoken to Harvey Fenton at Fab Press about perhaps publishing a book as well, and he had explained that he's very busy, and I don't know, I didn't want to bother him, but the opportunity arose for the other publisher, Carrero Press, and I was kind of ready to go with another book, which would be something which I would consider far more affordable, and I'd have more control over it. Plus, also, he said that he would handle all the design aspect of it, which was the time-consuming aspect on the previous book. So that was hung, drawn, and executed, and I got some good contributions from various people to just colour up a bit, though, sort of connect it to the past somehow, and all the great sort of horror actors that I knew as a kid growing up. So I had Boris Karloff's daughter contributed, Victoria Price, Vincent Price's daughter, and also Dacre Stoker, the great grandnephew of Bram Stoker. So and then a few other people as well, though. So that was a much better project, and so I regard that as probably being the first book, really. And this second or third book, if you like, arose because I had sufficient work to actually follow up with another book, as simple as that. And that mostly happened because of the pandemic. So shortly after, I mean, it's probably about a year after publishing the first book. In fact, actually, I had some dates to promote Hung, Drawn, and Executed, which then had to be cancelled because of the pandemic. But I got very, very busy during the pandemic. I mean, basically as somebody who works solo, freelance, and remotely to the clients, it didn't really affect my work. I mean, other than the fact I having worked from a studio space in town in London, it just meant working from home, which is where I've been pretty much ever since. So and it worked out fine. And my work became a lot more focused, I think. And so I think this second volume is superior to the first in quality of work. So literally it is a collection of work produced during that 3-year period when, from the beginning of the pandemic to the point where it seemed we were not subject to all the lockdowns, and vaccinated to the hilt, I guess, though. So really, this is a pandemic volume, if you like, but it's all kind of new work since the previous book, and with some interesting contributions as well. So it's been great. So it's literally just been out about 2 weeks now. We had the book launch, official book launch, this last weekend.
which I was at, which was very, very nice, and met lots of great people there. I'm just looking through it. And that's clearly what's about it, because I mean it does seem very fresh, and I'm looking at this artwork, and a lot of it I've not seen before. So it's it's. I'm going to say, when I use the word beautiful, I'm about to show you something that's probably not that you wouldn't necessarily consider beautiful, but there's like a picture of Jack Palance there as Dracula, but it's all interesting work. You were saying before that previously you had some contributions from Sarah Karloff, Victoria Price, and Dacre Stoker. I note that you've got Rob Zombie as doing your forward. Can you tell us how that came about?
Yeah, certainly. I was approached by Waxwork Records in the States to do a soundtrack album cover, and that initial project was for a film called Spider Baby. And it's a film I'd seen before, but they said that it hadn't been released on a proper
I remember
soundtrack
that film. Yep.
previously on vinyl. And so this kind of, well, it was quite a lavish job. I mean, there was a front cover, back cover, a gatefold, and then some other work involved as well. So it was quite a lengthy job, but I really liked the film anyway, though. So we produced that first cover, and then at the point where that was delivered, completed, they said, "Well, we've got some more coming, which we want to build into a series." And then he said that we've signed a deal with Rob Zombie, that basically this will be a series Rob Zombie presents, and Spider Baby was actually the first of those releases, unbeknownst to me. Uh, but meanwhile, we wanted an illustration which would be just like a portrait of Rob Zombie, which would be form part of a logo to just stamp an identity on each of the releases. So that you can see in the book, and so the next project after that was White Zombie, and then Carnival of Souls, and there are some others. Actually, two of the other ones are represented in the book. The idea being, well, this was going to be released last year, but I held it back just so I could actually get those pieces in. Unfortunately, it seems also that two of the other titles did get put back to the point where now the book is out, and yet, although they're kind of otherwise confidential, those two other releases are in the book as well. I know there are some more to come which aren't in the book, of course. So anyway, on the basis of that, I was invited to do the soundtrack cover for Rob Zombie's reboot of the Munsters, and I mean, he was. I was told by Waxwork Records that it was very specific that I'd be the artist to work on this series, because he'd obviously seen work, I think, probably on Instagram, Twitter, perhaps though, and clearly he's a big Hammer fan as well, and he must have seen a lot of the Hammer pieces I've done as well. But he said that he just loved the textures and the colours I was using, and I'm now sort of the official artist, I guess, on that series Rob Zombie presents, and there's some more to come as well, though. Uh, but yeah, so it's very easy then, having worked with him and actually had to communicate directly with him via email, and also on an anniversary re-release of House of a Thousand Corpses on 4K. I just thought he'd be quite happy to write something for me, and he was, and he was quite enthusiastic about it, and I gave him a chance to explain really what the connection is between the work I do and what he does as well, what his inspirations are. And so he pretty much gave us sort of a shopping list of all the things that are mutual to kind of monster kids around the world, I guess, though, which includes things like the Monsters, Addams Family, the Aurora hobby kits that came out with the Universal Monsters back in the early 70s. So these are all things that we had in common, and so I think that he was quite happy to write the piece for me.
I,
And
I see some of the visual style of both of you seem to be quite connected, because I mean this new Munsters film that came out was very bright and colourful, and I mean your work seems to use maybe colours you wouldn't necessarily expect in a horror film, because they're really quite bright. Do you feel there's a connection between the work that you do and Rob Zombie does on film?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. I mean, I remember watching House of Thousand Corpses the first time round, and just delighting at the color palettes. And I know that he's as I said, a very keen fan of the Hammer canon, and I kind of thought, looking at those films, that perhaps there was a bit of an influence there for some of the more lurid palettes of things like
Yeah,
Bride of Dracula in particular. I think of which has particularly rich colours, and the Gorgon. But yeah, actually with the monsters, he did say that he was um, uh, considering what he described as Mario Bava
yeah,
palettes for it,
yeah.
with the real sort of unnatural, hyper intensified, almost fluorescent colouring. When I was working on the Monster soundtrack, I have to add very quickly that the film was in production at the time, and actually, I don't think it even been entirely cast, even though they were already shooting in Hungary. Um, so at that point, for instance, Sylvester McCoy had been cast as Igor, and actually a lot of the sets weren't actually built. Some were, but some weren't. And so I was working with a very limited amount of material, not being able to see any footage at all, just a few kind of studio um, portrait shots. So it was very, very difficult to come up with some substantial artwork on the basis of not really being able to know anything about the film, not
Mm.
seeing any footage, and really not having um, any idea of the entire cast. So that was not an easy job. But I think he was very happy with the results, and that there are aspects of it that I feel quite um, happy about as well.
Yeah. Well, I notice this because there's so many new films, or say new releases of deep Blu-rays and all the different versions you've got in this book, so that you're doing a lot more. I feel older films now, stuff that in the olden days when we were, so when you're starting out, you were actually doing unknown films like The Evil Dead and Nightmare on Elm Street and stuff like that. Now you're doing some old favorites. What have been some of the favorite films you've got the chance to recreate as a DVD Blu-ray cover?
Well, two of those would be actually those soundtrack albums that are in the in the book, which are Waxwork Records as yet unreleased. Although I think they're imminent. I suspect probably that they're probably looking at Halloween release for maybe the two of them together. I'm not too sure, but they're two Vincent Price films anyway. And it was just fantastic to work on those. As far as Blu-ray is concerned, I mean, when you're looking at reissues of older films, I mean, the I guess the issue for the distributor is that most of the classic poster work and stills have been seen, over decades, and
Mm.
it's just familiar stuff. So I think the idea is always to try and find new angles on the films, and the sort of fresh packaging, which perhaps uh, it might appeal to a slightly different audience. Perhaps, I don't know. I mean, I think the remit is to mark a difference between their release and previous releases. That's why there's an awful lot of reworkings of on older films. I mean, I still get to work on new projects, but those tend to be independent films where perhaps the director producer is looking to sort of create some connection to uh, the past, perhaps maybe the films they loved watching when they were in their teens themselves, or even kids, and with an appreciation of I guess the sort of a legacy of horror, if you like. Though, I mean, there's obviously a clear interest in films from the 1980s, and a lot of the pieces you'll see in the book are reworkings, not necessarily licensed stuff, but certainly private commissions for reworkings of films like I think Jaws is in there, and Dawn of the Dead. off the top of my head, I can't remember.
That's all right.
Buy the book and you'll find that.
You will, but that's something. So I think it's right because I mean, a lot of some of these older films, are probably maybe even public domain or whatever they are. You've seen so many versions of them over the years. It's really great that they're putting them into a higher grade and maybe using your artwork, and it sets it apart. And that's why you would want to buy it again, because it's got your artwork on it. So I think that's very interesting. How do you feel your techniques and methods have evolved over the years? Because I mean, the last book was kind of showing some of your older work. How do you feel it's changed looking at your all your work within one book?
Well, I guess the style does kind of change slightly. Perhaps I know that people tell me they can recognise my work instantly, and that's probably from stuff they've seen from years ago. But so clearly there's a thread and a sort of a look which I guess people identify as mine. For me, though, that there is a change in the style and in the techniques, and it's I guess because it happens over a period of time, gradually. Perhaps it's not entirely obvious, but perhaps if you look at the new book, compare it to stuff I was doing in the 1980s, I think you'll see a clear difference, and also just the approach to the subject matter and compositions as well. It is now quite different, I think, to where it was 40 years ago, and that's all part of as you get older, you kind of refine a technique and actually experiment a bit more. I mean, that's what you have to do. You have to keep kind of trying out different things and different approaches, and it's quite easy to get stuck into a sort of one single way of approaching everything and working. I do remember, I think it's 2 or 3 years ago, somebody was talking about my work, and it must have been on Facebook or Twitter or something like that. And I think they're talking about Blu-ray covers in particular. And I know somebody kind of thought that this is something quite funny, that basically I just do the same thing over and over again for the same purple coloured film. I think they just thought everything I do is like coloured purple. Well, actually, I thought it was quite amusing. Thinking, well, actually, I do use purple quite a lot. It's true. So I consciously decided not to use purple for a good year or so.
It's a spooky color. It's a spooky dark
Well,
color. So
it is, and I just remember reading, kind of way back when I first started out, and I had time on my hands, not to waste, I add, but to fill, looking for inspiration and going to libraries, reading lots of books, going to lots of exhibitions, and just looking for a stimulus, really. So that would then help me create sample pieces, which I could put into the folio, hoping then to generate more work. And I did read quite a lot at the time about, I guess they were like study cases from 100 years ago, maybe a bit less. Where obviously there was a whole thing that gentlemen of a certain standing and class who have the money could go and go on trips abroad for a year or so and study, various tribes, Africa, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, places like this. They, I guess it was kind of considered quite exotic, but also, they kind of produce this body of work, which would, on the one hand, be a kind of a serious kind of examination of a different culture. On the other hand, for them, it was like probably a bit of a sort of a boy's own adventure as well. But yeah, some of the tales of, I guess, mythology and magic and sort of local legends, and especially around Papua New Guinea, I thought, which had some sort of, I guess, not voodoo per se, because it's not really voodoo they practice there, but it's certainly, anything to do with tribal magic was quite interesting, I thought, for me at the time. And I was particularly interested to read about colour as well. And it seemed there were two colours which always came to the fore, which were purple and green, which probably much to do with vegetation and dyes that were available at the time. But really kind of resonated. So I thought the purple and green thing, that's something I'd used in the first Evil Dead poster, and I knew also that they kind of resonated within the sort of psychedelic scene, in especially in America, in the very early 1970s, late 60s, even, which sort of acid trip, induced colors. So I just thought that was quite an interesting thing. So that's why I've always used a lot of purple and green in the work, and it's really a sort of an attempt to introduce something slightly magical and alarming.
It's interesting to say, because spooky, our colours are green, so because it's greeny, spooky type stuff. So obviously there's something there, and it's a really great insight into why your later work. But this is all very colourful now, and I'm looking through the work, and it's all you've obviously opened up your palette since then. You talk. There's a really good bit in it about how you create a piece of your artwork, and I think is it called wet brush or dry brush? I forget which one it
Dry
is.
brush is the technique, but there's the wash, which happens at the beginning of every job, and the reason I've always uh, put a wash down in advance of the other paintwork is simply just, I remember years and years ago, at the very beginning of the career, and the technique was very, very different then, and there was no wash, for instance, underneath. I would just literally go in with a paint, and usually build up from dark colors to light colors. It's a very classic way of painting, and something that I guess was kind of standard technique for these sort of old masters, if you like. I mean, we'd gone into art history at art college, and this was something I was really interested in, and it wasn't like a pretentious attempt to kind of become a master, but it was just a way of working which seemed to make sense. You just build up, and you just to the point where you get the highlights of the last things that you add, and there's always this ongoing joke at college that some people just would rush their work just so they get to the point where they can add a tiny little white dot in the eyes, to do a little bit of shine. Everybody seemed to really love that little moment. But I found that very occasionally there would be tiny, tiny little white areas of paper showing through, and it was just virtually invisible to me. But a couple of clients had noted that there were some white bits showing, and they kind of felt they'd been shortchanged slightly. So I just thought, we'll solve that. So I just started doing washes, so that literally there would be no white paper showing through, and that's the reason why I started developing the wash technique at the beginning of each job. But also, it provides a good texture to work over in terms of sometimes you can go with the sort of the flow of the paint that's there, and once it's dried, it actually kind of suggests sort of patterns to you. I guess the other thing is it kind of establishes the basic color theme of any piece of work, and when I get to that wash stage, I have an idea in my mind which way it should go, and once I put that initial wash down, that really pretty much determines how the rest of the colors will actually look. And sometimes it's by working against the colors. So for instance, if you had a largely green palette, you could then work reds and oranges perhaps over the top of that, which would contrast and add sort of visual interest.
That's good. I'm learning lots of stuff here. It's becoming an art class, but that's it's
Yeah,
it's really
don't
good.
become competition, will you?
What's that? No, I don't. I'm into. I like the white bit in the eyes, because you see that on the YouTube videos when they're doing. Like when you see on thing when people are doing the stuff, they always put the white in the eyes.
Well, it's interesting because I studied Tibetan art over a period of courses, and it's just one of those things when you build up some of these amazing, quite complex images, mostly it's kind of images of various deities that kind of sort of wrathful deities or kind of benign um, deities. The last thing you do on a project is actually add the eyes, and that then brings the
Sort
actual,
of life.
enables a life to that particular deity and empowers the artwork. So,
Yeah.
yeah, the eyes are very, very important, and I mean, I don't think they do a little white dot in the eyes exactly. That
No.
seems to be something that we all enjoy more so over here. But yeah, the yeah, trying to uh, understand where the focus on an illustration will be, and actually making sure those are the bits which you really concentrate on, because faces are so important, and the way they communicate in
We're
expression.
talking as we've been talking and about eyes, and that one actually doesn't. One of the things that doesn't have eyes. I mean, I suppose it has eye
Yeah, I do a lot of
sockets, but
skulls. They never don't have eyes. Yeah,
yeah. So
so
there's
no white dots to worry about.
Freddie's sort of got eyes, white eyes there. I just noticed on the back here you've got some interesting. You've got Dacre Stoker saying it's a feast on the blood of the past and nourished in you. You've got Richard Stanley, a danger to bourgeois society, and then you've got Clive Barker saying beautiful and transformative. So there's some big names there that are
Yeah,
saying nice
they
things
seem
about
to
your
be
work.
carried across from the previous publication. I don't know whether um, that was just an oversight.
You think they're talking about your previous work? If maybe they saw it now, they might
Well,
not
I
be
mean,
so
those were
kind.
quotes. Those were two of those were quotes from the very first book, actually, which was the what was called Drawing Blood, the
Yeah.
supposed luxury item. Um, the Dacre Stoke one was definitely written for the previous book, Hung, Drawn,
Okay.
Executed. Um, but we did, there were some new quotes from the new contributors, which I did identify, and I just think that perhaps, you know, for whatever reason, they didn't get
Well,
added in. But
no, they're good names anyway, and it shows that people like you work.
oh yeah, yeah.
What's your view of digital using digital? I notice a lot of people use their tablets now and do all their artwork there. Is that something you'd ever consider, or it's just not something that's your
But
bag?
there are some digital aspects, in as much that everything I paint gets scanned in and delivered digitally anyway. It exists as a digital file as far as the client's concerned, and that's all they get. Um, and I keep the artwork. I have been playing around with a technique which I've used on quite a few things now, which is more line work, which is then scanned in and then coloured in Photoshop, and some textures added over the top. And it's what I've been doing for the last couple of years with the Fright Fest artwork, for instance, their poster, which means it just I can do sections of illustrations. I can have
Well, and then
parts
stick
which
them
then
together
can
and
be
move them around and
all the
stuff like that.
parts. Yeah, exactly. So it can be a portrait format poster, quad, web banner. Um,
Yeah.
Individual parts can be used on badges or the festival passes. So yeah, it can be versatile, and it's been really good for that. And so that has a digital aspect, but it's still um, hand drawn, and a lot of line work still. It's like maybe just black paint on white paper. So there is still the handmade aspect. I mean, I know a number of digital artists, and the work's fantastic, and it's it's not a threat to what I do, and it's just a different way of working, I guess. I mean, I prefer to use paint because it's what I've always used, and I feel comfortable using it. And I like the quality of you know making a bit of a mess, I guess, though, um, and also the sort of happy accidents that happen when you're working. Something, perhaps the brush isn't delivering what you quite want it to. I mean, brushes, wear down quite quickly, but that kind of process, in that stage where they're kind of not as they were, they're not pristine, but they're actually almost becoming useless. Sometimes the marks you get out of them can be quite unexpected and actually useful in building up different textures. But the paint I use, it's always been the same paint. It's it's designer's gouache. It's a kind of water-based paint. It's very versatile. You can use it as washes, and build up quite thick, opaque layers as well. and it dries very fast. And for me, it's the perfect paint to use. And the colours, as long as you know what you're doing, you can still get quite good bright colours out of them. The um, in less able hands, it's quite easy. And like any paint, really, you can quickly go to sort of mud colours and greys without intending to. But if you know what you're doing, you get some quite intense colours.
And they are really quite intense. And just before we let you go, because I know you're doing work today, and what are you what's coming up for you now that the book's published? You've had your wonderful book launch the weekend. What's next for Graham Humphreys?
Well, since the book was published, I mean, I think all the files were delivered at the beginning of the year, so there's obviously new work since then. So one hopes that there'll be a further volume as well down the
Oh,
line
that's
as
awesome.
well. But for instance, today I'm finishing off what will be the poster for the Weekend of the Dead George A. Romero Festival coming up the beginning of November. So that needs to go off to the printer this week at some point. So then I'll be working on straight onto a Blu-ray cover for a company called Film Treasures. Then I've got a list of
You got
quite a
lots of
few.
you got lots of work going on. It seems you're not going
Yeah,
to.
yeah. There's plenty ahead. Yeah, I mean, I've already said that. I'm completely stacked up until next February. But we'll be taking on work, which will be for after that period. But right now, I mean, that's only about 4 months away anyway. So
No, that's not long at all. What are you doing for Halloween? It's only a couple of weeks to Halloween now. What's your Halloween going to look like?
well, I've always said that every day's Halloween to me. The only day I don't celebrate Halloween is on Halloween, really.
That's
But,
very true.
I'm going to go and see Fabio Frizzi at the Union Chapel. I love his music, and we've worked together on a couple of projects, and so I'm looking forward to that. Um, I'm going to see Kid Congo Powers, the night before. He's playing up in Hackney. Kid Congo, if you don't know him, was very, very talented guitarist who was a backbone for both the Cramps and the Gun Club, two of my favourite bands, who really influenced the work I did in the 1980s in particular, but I still uh, um, refer to their music now for occasional inspiration as well. So I'm looking forward to that. Uh, Other than that, literally the week after, I'll be up in Manchester for the Weekend of the Dead Festival. And then, of course, at the end of November is Dark Fest, which is the Dark Side magazine weekend coming up at the Genesis Cinema in the East End, in Ripper territory, of course. So, and also it's an area which is referenced in Bram Stoker's Dracula as well. Just off Brick Lane is a street where Dracula is referenced as storing 6 of the coffins, which he rings London with as a sort of a wherever he's in London, he can go somewhere and find a coffin. Basically, but yeah, 6 of those
That's
go
his
into Brick.
storage. As he's got a storage unit off Brick Lane, basically,
Yes,
Dracula. With his,
yeah, one of those yellow
yeah,
storage units.
that's right. Anyway, thank you very much, Graham. It's wonderful. I'm really enjoying this book. I look forward to it again. Hopefully, I'll catch up with you at some of these events that are going on over the next couple of weeks and months.
And
And
I've got to think of a witty title for the next volume.
you do. So, what you got? Nightmare on One Street. You had
On one
Hung
sheet.
Drawn.
On one
What's that?
sheet.
One sheet. One
One sheet
sheet.
being
Yes,
the
one
traditional film
sheet.
poster
Yeah.
format. Yeah.
Of course it is, and then you've got that's probably going to be harder doing that than the paintings. I'm imagining.
Yeah. Well, it was going to be called a coffin table book, but that was stolen by Butch Patrick, who played obviously Eddie Munster,
Eddie
his
Munster.
book.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right. Well, I'm sure that is a good one. All right. Anyway, you have a great one, Graham. We'll talk to you later.
Good
Okay.
to see you.
See you. Bye
Nice to
bye.
chat.